This video is for my Christians and my Hebrews, my people that believe in Yahweh as Lord. I'm a Patriarchy versus Matriarchy scholar, and I'm here to show you how Yahweh ordered for Asherah, who represents Matriarchy, to be eliminated, erased, eradicated, and exterminated. Biblical patriarchal men knew that they could not hide all of the history of women because women history predates man by far. Her statuettes, her temples, her remnants, if they were to ever be uncovered and dug out of the earth, men needed to have a cover-up. And one of the main cover-ups is associating themselves with these women as consorts or kings to these women. You often hear the wife of when referring to a woman, and the majority of cases, if not all, these kings were not wives to these women. These kings came to take over with patriarchy, and since matriarchy existed first, there was a slow intertwining with the literary and the symbolism. These kings forged their way into the symbolism and literary by claiming to be the kings and consorts to these matriarchal women. Another cover-up to hide these matriarchal women was to have a derogatory label for them. So biblical men called and labeled these women as pagans, idol worshippers, witches, sorcerers, demonic, evil, etc. Okay, let's get into the literary. Given that Asherah was an ancient goddess and widely worshipped and at times officially sanctioned, how did she disappear entirely into the sands of time? How did the wife of Yahweh disappear? Even a cursory review of the Old Testament will reveal how Asherah was perceived as a monster, an abominable figure whose worship would later become prohibited. She was concisely eradicated from worship by religious authority figures. In the Old Testament, we are told that the land of Canaan was to be promised land for the Hebrew tribes upon their exodus. Prior to their arrival, Canaan was already populated, but that didn't stop the Hebrews from invading and following the command of Yahweh. The command was, obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the lands where you are. So this right here is a tell sign of patriarchy versus matriarchy, where the Hebrews was heading to was already populated by matriarchs. Break down their altars, match their sacred stones that they built their free energy communities with, cut down the Asherah pole, do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. The Hebrews not only intended to take the land of Canaan for themselves, but also to replace the existing religion with Yahwism. The worship of Yahweh in Judah, particularly during the reign of King Hezekiah and Josiah, led to a suppression of the other deities, including Asherah, and monotheistic ideology clashed with the polytheistic Canaanite beliefs she represented. As kings consolidated, y'all heard this? Their authority, they sought to unify their subjects under a single deity, often associating Yahweh with political legitimacy and stability. Now, we got to remember we talking about justification for patriarchy versus matriarchy, since these biblical patriarchal men was removing and eradicating these women villages. These matriarchal women left symbolism in goddess temples for retreats and safe havens apart from what these men ruled. This symbolism is in the goddess temple of Hathor. The goddess temple of Hathor was built the same exact time of these patriarchal biblical gender wars. For the golden calf in the Bible is symbolism of the goddess Hathor. See, truth in plain sight. Her intertwining symbolism with a cow, bees, birds, and especially snakes was to show that these animals can procreate with no man counterpart, what is called the God act of human parthenogenesis. The goddess temple of Hathor is still standing because it was built with magnetic elements. This goddess temple symbolism contains mastering iconography of the collective conscious on boats sailing the rising waters of the earth. The earth waters rises at Antarctica by 200 feet, and ideally enough, we can be convinced of and shown what Mars, Mercury, and the moon look like, but no one has been shown what's beyond the magnetism and the rising waters of Antarctica. Sea level rises. Let's continue. As kings consolidated their authority, they sought to unify their subjects under a single deity, often associating Yahweh with political legitimacy and stability. This marginalized other gods like Asherah, which were seen as potential contenders for divine favor. We must also consider patriarchal and gender bias in the Bible. Biblical texts were primarily written by and for men, reflecting a patriarchal perspective that often marginalized female deities. Asherah's association with fertility and the female spirit likely contributed to her marginalization. Remember what I was telling you about human parthenogenesis, which is procreating with no man counterpart. This is why goddesses was worshipped, and this is why fertility is attached to their worship. Additionally, considerations include the fact that Yahweh was often portrayed as jealous and demanding exclusive worship. Asherah, being a Canaanite goddess, was labeled as foreign and potentially harmful, justifying her removal from sacred spaces and narratives. Deep. Several kings attempted to erase her. King Hezekiah, his reign 715 through 687 BCE, marked a significant shift towards Yahweh worship. He destroyed Asherah poles and banned her worship practices. King Manasseh, though initially following his father's reforms, Manasseh reintroduced Asherah worship along with other deities during his reign. King Josiah, he led a comprehensive purge, and we'll get into that later, how men purged on women, of polytheistic practices during his reign. This included destroying Asherah poles and removing references of her in the temple and religious text. Let's continue. One of the earliest stories we have regarding Asherah in the Bible comes from the book of Judges 6:25, wherein a man named Gideon is commanded by Yahweh to tear down his Asherah pole. Tear down your father's altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. And in the middle of the night, Gideon sneaks out and destroys the altar. In the morning, the men of the community demand to know who destroyed the Asherah pole and altar of Baal. And once it was discovered to be Gideon, the community demanded Gideon's brother to be put to death as a punishment for the desecration. Gideon's life is only spared by the intercession of his father, Josiah, presumably a priest of both Baal and Asherah. This story clearly reveals much about the significance of Asherah worship during this period. Asherah in the Talmud. Asherah is further mentioned in the Talmud text called Avodah Zarah within a legal context. This text, which means foreign worship or adultery, references the prohibition of Asherah's poles. There are 3 laws of Asherah forbidden. Wow. We are here. And this is symbolism of the goddess Asherah from different cultures. Her free energy symbolism from different cultures. Then we have biblical text, Deuteronomy, break down all Asherah poles, smash her sacred stones that she built her free energy societies, communities with. All women societies that was erased from biblical patriarchal texts conducted free energy villages and societies, and they left fast symbolism of it. And they even left symbolism for a way out of patriarchy. So As we go through this time of awakening, we experience this war and this killing that's going on. We have to remember that symbolism is all around us, and symbolism was the first words and the first truth, and matriarchs taught this symbolism and left this symbolism for a reason. When men rule in unruly and unjust ways, and now it's time to return back to the matriarchs. Matriarchs rising.